Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my creative process. I'm Stuart. I'm an illustrator, 3D artist, designer, and your pal. I'm excited to have you back for another episode this week, number 236. Unfortunately, we missed episode last week, which I apologize for. The schedule has been insane lately, just trying to keep up with demands coming from several different directions at all times. But no worries, we're back here. And today we've got sort of a simple, but I think a fun little exercise. Trying to, doing sort of smaller bites lately. In the last episode we did a quick tip, which I think was kind of fun. And today I think we're going to be doing sort of a small kind of scene, but I think it could wind up having a lot of personality and being pretty fun. So let's get into it. As you can see, we're doing a little B box here. So somewhat fairly simple forms. I'm going to be probably using some bools, some cubes, and we'll be stacking things. And I think what I also want to do is have some little stylized bees flying around and then set it in kind of a simple green little setting. So let's get in there and just start modeling. Actually, the first thing might be to create these little handle shapes. I think what I'll do there is just grab a sphere, pull it off to the side so we can see it better. Let's set that to hemisphere. I'm going to hit C to expand it, rotate it upside down, and then just right click and close this polygon hole. That's pretty easy. Sort of get it roughly into position here. And I'm going to throw this into a bool. There we have it. So there's our first little handle. What we do is I'm just gonna quickly line this up by eye. I'm gonna grab this cube. I'm gonna just subdivide it, just so I can see where the midpoint is on each of these. Right. So let's create a null, basically hitting Alt G while selecting the cube. But that's just so we can make sure that this null is placed exactly at the center here. So what I'm going to do is throw that sphere in. Let's get our lines going. And then I'm going to copy this guy over. Whoops. I'm going to copy this guy over to the other side. Get it sort of approximately in the same position. I'll show you what we can do is I'm going to grab both of these, hit G, Command G rather, Alt G, and then just zero that out, and I know that these two are symmetrically positioned, which is kind of neat. And then since I know that this is at the center point, I can hold Control and rotate, and there are these two. Now I'm going to hold Shift while I bring them in. So that one came in 60. Let's do the same over here. Let's just sort of eyeball and compare these two. Six. It's pretty close. It doesn't have to be exact. So I'm just going to scoot them in a little bit and just kind of cheat it. And in fact, one of the sides of this B box won't even be visible once we get everything stacked up. So let's see what else we got. So we've got sort of a taller segment below, and we've got these two sort of smaller segments. We could actually make this a little taller. I'm going to take this whole Boolean, copy it up, and I'm going to cheat. So we got a slightly nicer shadow. And I'm going to put that like just a little bit of an air gap there. And while we're at it, let's fire up Octane, which is still having an error with the bool. Let's hit that again. There we go. And you know what? I went ahead and lined this thing up, even though we've got to reduce the height. And so I'm just sort of eyeballing the difference here. That should work. Cool. And I'm going to copy the next one up. And it looks like, well, it looks like it's about the same height when you include this top sort of cap thing. But I'm gonna make a separate piece there. So double clicking. What's cool is if you've got an object that's inside of a bool, you can double click and it'll give you that object directly. It took me a while to discover that feature. It's a useful one. All right, so let's push that guy down a little. Now I'm just going to copy and paste that final cube out of the hierarchy there. Let's just make it a touch larger in the X and Z axes. And actually, come to think of it, this whole upper area is larger. I wonder if that's typical of beehives. That one looks pretty flush. Now, and these ones look a little bit different. And you know, I don't love the metal top here. This one does have a larger sort of upper section. I do kind of like these individual lids. I think I'm going to add those into mine. Cool. These guys have different handles, but I like the handles we have going on here. So let's mix it up. And that's the beauty of looking at a lot of different reference imagery. You don't have to follow any one design. In fact, there's often sort of cool things you can take from several designs. Great, so that one's slightly larger. Maybe this one needs to even be larger still. I'm just holding shift as I click those little arrows to get me an increment of 10. I could sort of use this as a spacing guide almost. And that, I think, actually gives it much more of that iconic B-box kind of look. Cool. And so as you can see, I didn't have an exact plan for this image when I started. And that's typical of this show. I just want to help to show the creative process and all. And it's different for everybody, but this is the kind of thing I like to do. And what we also need to do, I think, is move these out a little bit, because when that box got bigger, cut further into each of these Boolean shapes. And I'm doing all these just to kind of stay even, but to be honest, these probably won't even be visible in the renderings we output. But it's good to have clean assets, so I'll take the extra minute just to make it happen. All right. Getting there, getting there. Nathan, what's up, buddy? That's right. Little bee box. Not like beatboxing, but the box of bees. That's right. Always. I'm not going to build out a whole complex outdoor kind of scene to go with this, but I'm going to sort of hint at it with just some simple color selections and things like that. I'm looking at these as I'm rendering, I think the edges are a little bit too sharp. So just to get a little bit more of a stylized look, and just a nice little kind of edge reflection, we can just add a tiny little fillet to these, just going to give us a slightly more realistic look. Go like 1.5. So that looks pretty good. exactly. Because even, if you look really closely at your desk or, the windowsill or any other man-made thing, what you think of as a hard, crisp, clean edge, if you look closely, it actually does have a little bit of rounding or a little bit of a bevel that tends to catch light. All right, let's get a simple material onto this B box. And then I want to add some really kind of simple stylized Bs. Here's our background. Let's group that stuff. What a neat little organized scene this is. No, I love that wood surface. So let's bring the scale down. Let's stretch up a little bit, actually. I'm just going to be modifying some of these parameters just to make things look stylized and how we want them. And then I like to just turn it way down. I think a lot of the samples and examples that I've seen are kind of a light blonde wood, a yellowy setup there. I'm going to bring this very same texture into the bump channel. I'm going to make it grayscale, or black and white in this gradient. Now, weirdly, it doesn't seem to be making a big change. I do frequently, yeah. I've been looking at these guys, and and other B boxes. Usually, what I'll do, especially with more complicated scenes, is draw a sketch. Just kind of start thinking about how I want to, handle the different shapes and things like that. How to compose the scene, all that good stuff. Let's zoom out just a touch. So that's not bad. Let's see if we can get that bump a little stronger, though. I'm really not noticing. There's a little bit of it. It's also because of the way our lighting's set up. I'm going to flip these values. Actually, there you go. I turned this texture and diffuse way down, and you can see how it's handled, or how, what difference the bump map makes, which is a pretty good one, actually. So I'm going to add just a little bit of color to that. That's probably getting us close to what we want in terms of the texture here. I want to keep it fairly simple. We could go in and add little nails and details along the side. Actually, which might be a nice thing to do, because this is, I think, lacking a little bit of detail. So before we do those beautiful stylized bees, let's kind of make a few nail heads to stick here and there. I'm obviously not going to go ahead and model the whole nail. We'll just do these little simple cylinders, kind of slug them into place. I'm also going to add a camera because I kind of like the view we're sitting at now. I want to go ahead and modify that. I want to get closer to do it. And while we're in here, let's turn these down to like 24. It's going to be awfully small, so we don't need quite that many polygons. What I'll also do is grab one of these nulls, copy and paste it, and add the nail to that, because I know this is centered on the boxes, this null. Then while holding Alt, I'm going to go ahead and add symmetry, boom, and now our nails are all centered up. Let's take a look back from this camera angle. Do we like that? Does that help the look? Yeah, I think it does. Let's add a few more. And I'm not really going to worry about getting these exactly aligned and perfectly distributed on each of the boxes, because I think, well, having a little bit of roughness and a little bit of, I guess not technically misalignment, because I'm using a symmetry object here, but you could call it, say, inconsistency in nail placement along the vertical axis. How's that? Cool. Yeah, I don't mind that. Maybe they could be a bit darker. Let's move on to the bees. Whoa. Nice. There we go. So I'm just going to make a new scene. Start thinking about, actually we should get some Bumblebee reference as well. Honeybee. Start thinking about how to simplify these guys. I'm probably going to go pretty cartoonish with it. In fact, why don't we do this kind of thing? We'll have just sort of a round head and a larger body. I'm going to keep this very sort of geometric and simplified. I might also, I'm just going to kind of cheat here and make a wing Kind of the same shape as the body. Again, and before I pull that off center, I'm going to group it. Going to make it symmetrical. I'm going to rotate it. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to take the widget. I'm going to move that over so it's close to the tip there. And that's just going to make it easier to position now. There we go. Our symmetry was pointing in the wrong direction. All right. Now that is some kind of beat. Cool. Now before I texture it, I'm just going to get it into the scene. So let's group it, copy it, paste it. Weird. Oh, there we go. I was wondering where that other wing went. It's just, it's behind. There we go. Like, is the symmetry broken? All right, so I'm keeping them a little large for the time being, just while we texture. It's weird that our textures aren't coming through here. There we are. And so what do we need for a B? I know we need like a dark brown. A lot of times you think of a B as black and yellow, but I'm going to go dark brown and yellow here, which I think is going to give us a little bit of a richer color. And I think it's actually maybe a little bit more realistic to the way they are in real life. So then let's get the stripey thing going. And I'm going to go for fairly broad stripes because this guy's going to be significantly smaller. And all that detail is going to go away. Now let's make our nice bright yellow material. Oops. What would also be cool is if you get a roughness map and an opacity map with like a little veiny texture to make these wings really take on some of that interesting insect wing texture. But that's, I think, a bridge too far for this episode. Let's call that B. Let's get it sized down more appropriately. Well, I do want to find the sweet spot. I want to make it visible and fun. It's okay if it seems out of scale. I think somewhere around there actually feels pretty good. So let's get a bunch of them going around. A touch bigger. And instead of copying those directly, I'm going to use an instance here to make things easier. I think we can play with really the 3D space a little bit. If we want to get more detail in one of these bees, we could bring them a lot closer to the camera. This bee's flying towards you. I guess the other thing I'm sort of omitting is There's usually a little opening around the base here where the honeybees get in. I should probably add that. All right, bee box. Yeah, this little kind of opening at the bottom. Let's not forget that. Let's give these guys a way to get into their home. I'm just going to take this cube and I'm going to copy it right into the spool. And we can use that to just cut a little tiny slot in the bottom of the box. I don't know if this is super accurate. All you beekeepers out there, don't get too mad at me. I assume there's tons of beekeepers who tune into this channel. I'm just going to use that same piece of geometry. Like, that's a principle that could really save a lot of time if you use it properly. It's just kind of using the geometry that's already there. If it's already in position, you can bring it in and sort of save a step, positioning it. I mean, working in 3D, oftentimes positioning things is one of the tedious steps. So if I know I need a cube there, why not just use one that we've already got in position? Exactly what I did. Okay. Now, these can get into their home. Maybe this guy's getting a little closer. Another fun touch might be to have just kind of a little pool in the corner here of kind of a goldeny yellow honey liquid. All right, not terrible. I kind of like the contrasty pop of yellow and this dark brown color against the kind of light and cheerful green background that we have going on. All right. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a pain, but I think it would be remiss in making a bumblebee illustration if I didn't include dotted lines, little swirly dotted lines of the bees coming in and out of the hive. So let's try to do that. I think the best way, I'm just going to add, let's see, kind of spline should I add here? Let's just go with a rectangle. Now it's automatically adding them to everybody, which is not what I want. So I'm going to expand our rectangle, go into point mode, turn off close spline, just get us a straight line here. The center axis command is super useful, so much so that I've added it to my sort of shortcuts here. And then I just centered it out, and now we've got a spline coming right out of the bee, which is going to be useful. What I'm going to do is, now that we've got it aligned, I'm going to pull it out of the bee because I don't want a swirly line off of each of these guys. And even if I did, it would all be pointing in different directions. I want to sort of control specifically where this spline ends up. But now that I've got one in position, I know that the one end of it's stuck in that bee, so I'm going to take the other end of it and bring it close to where I need it. Let's see if we can get it coming out of that box. All right, so that's pretty good. That's not a very beautiful shape, obviously, so let's work on that. Find the right kind of swirling line. Something like that might work. Select all the points except for the one coming out of the B. I'm going to hit this soft interpolation. And now I'm going to start, messing with the curve, so to speak. I like to use the scale tool a lot to modify the severity of some of the curves, and then you kind of rotate it, scale it. And you want to avoid adding too many curves to keep your lines kind of smooth, even. Or adding too many points to the curve, I should say. Now, a lot of times I would just sweep this, but since I want a dotted line, I'm going to have a slightly different approach. So let's add a sphere, shrink it down a little bit, and we're going to have to go smaller than that eventually. And let's just call it like 12 segment sphere, something small. Now let's clone it, and we'll take that, turn it into a object cloner, and then this rectangle, I'm going to bring it up close to this cloner. Oops. And then I'm going to drag it into this object slot here. Now, things are uneven, so let's make them even in this distribution. Let's scale our sphere way down, because that's way too big, and jack up the number of clones we have. Oops. Let's see if step is any more even. Whoops, I went too far. Because of the way they're foreshortened in 3D perspective, dots are a little sort of tight in one of the sections, so I'm gonna just modify this curve. Hopefully get things looking a little better. Also, now that we've got this curve going, I need to modify the position of some of these B's. B's, please. What's up, Artyom? Make some rocks and glass. Yeah, I mean, that would be an excellent thing to add. I have made rocks and grass on this channel, I think probably ad nauseum. And I'm under a little bit of a time constraint today. I'm going to keep the surrounding elements relatively simple. But I mean, that's an excellent idea for an illustration, I think. Rocks and grass and a little scene, maybe a few clouds, all kinds of stuff could really, help expand the look here and make a very sweet little illustration. And in fact, if you do wind up picking up any of the techniques here or decide to make a V-Box of your own, I'd love to see how it comes out, what you wind up with. All right, I have to decide on a material for this dotted line because this fight's a little bit harsh. I'm going to make another specular material. Let's see. I don't want it to be too glassy though. So let's turn the index down. Let's turn the roughness up. Actually gets us pretty close to where we want to be. Add a little bit of color to the transmission, maybe a light blue. Maybe a lighter color is better. Well, you can't see that color. Yeah, to me, this light yellow is kind of making sense. Looks as if there's a like a blur, like a linear blur of the bee flying by, leaving a trail of its yellow color behind. And a few of these. Another thing you could do to help guide your viewers' attention around the composition is use sort of the direction of things to point them. If this bee is facing this direction, I think it will automatically sort of attract, it'll point the viewer's eye in that same direction. That works a little bit with animals and other living things. Works really well with people. If you have someone's like a person with their gaze fixed in a certain direction in your composition, will almost always lead the user's eye in that direction. We're like hardwired to look at where other people are looking. That's why the sclera, or the white of our eye, is white. Other primates have dark sclera to hide their gaze. So monkeys can like look off at other delicious fruit and not tell members of their troop the direction they're looking. Humans, on the other hand, we like sharing that information for whatever reason. Cool. So I'm wondering if I should add another one of these. I think I will. I'm going to copy this rectangle. Which bee is this? I'm going to add this new rectangle, this bee instance, and I'm going to zero out the rotation position. I hope that I get pretty close to having this thing centered. And I was wrong. Let's see. Originally, wasn't there? All right, so let's say -70. Maybe that'll get us a position. Well, it's closer. It's just oriented in the wrong direction. Let's see. Yeah, it's a start, actually. Cool. So that's pretty good. Let me get rid of some of these dots, kind of simplify things before I make them more complicated. Ooh, and speaking of foreshortening dots, this guy might be a little bit of an issue. Well, let's see. He's kind of close to the camera. Wondering if that'll cause any issues with the amount of dots. Eek. Funny looking curve. All right. All right, that's not so bad. See how it looks when we get our cloner on it. And we can lose that position, pull him out of B, make a copy of that cloner, and just copy this new rectangle in. The beauty of having it set to step is it's the amount of clones is defined by the distance between them, not the count. So I would have had to, increase the count as I made this copy and sort of guessed, but even keeps it pretty consistent. Cool. One last thing I might do is have the dots get slightly smaller as I get away. So let's make the spheres a little larger so we can check on that. Whoops, I'm jerking the camera all over. All right. Yeah, I can't just treat this like a normal clone because it's an object, so or like an object style cloner. So what I'll do is add, what is it, a plane effector, right? Is that what I want? Plane. I have the same plane effector drive in both of these cloners. I don't want position as the parameter. I want scale. Just a tiny amount because there's so many of them. They like disappear. I lied. I don't want a plane effector. I want a step effector. Making sure these are, yep, both affected by the step effector. Scale. Let's turn it down. I think I had too severe a shrinking effect there. It may be difficult to see some of this through the live stream, so I'll zoom in a little more. I think we can make a few little tweaks to the materials and the lighting and stuff here, and I'm about ready to call it. So I think we can go just a little darker, more saturated on this green. Let's modify the lighting a little. We could use some highlight lighting. Whoops. Well, that's huge. to make this light a bunch warmer. Make our main light a little bit cooler. Some of that contrast temperature, which is nice. And what I will also want to do, ooh, this isn't very centered. Let's zoom in a little, center it up a little better. And I want to make a little highlight lights for the cyc in the back. So I'm going to copy this light, zero out the rotation. Just kind of align it to the back here. Let's move it closer, down. Oh, and it's too visible, so let's change that. Let's make it a little wider. I just want it to be a little bit of a subtle kind of shot to the background there. Let's make that kind of neutral lighting as well. All right. What's up, Dahmer? Dahmer B. Thoughts on NFT? Man, I have a lot of thoughts on NFT. I think it's a very cool thing for some artists. I think most artists who get involved don't really make any money. I've minted one and it's had very little interest. And it was actually, it wasn't free to mint. There are gas fees. So I wound up using much of the ETH that I had saved anyway to create the piece. So it works out to be like a little bit of, not exactly a pyramid scheme, but there are only a select few people who really make a lot of money from it, but they stand to make more money the more other people involved in the whole thing that don't make a ton of money. Sort of like a pyramid scheme, if that makes sense. Because the more people who buy in, the higher the value of ETH goes. So the price you sell your NFT for, the dollar amount is not fixed. It's fixed ETH amount, which the value of changes quite dramatically. The value of that is more likely to go up the more people are, trading ETH. Makes it, more of a commodity. So that's cool. I think there's a lot of cool work happening. I think Beeple is a legend of digital art in so many ways, but he's really the odd man out. And I saw an artist named Kevin Parry tweeted an amazing statement, which was like the takeaway lesson from Beeple selling his NFTs for all that money is not to rush into NFTs and try to make it rich. It's to grind away at 14 years of daily artistic output. So I think NFTs are a little bit of a fad. I think there is probably some useful technological aspects to them that may outlive this sort of digital art bubble that's sort of happening right now. I hope there's some upside. I'm glad that artists are making money on them. And all of this is not to mention the environmental costs, which there's a lot of reading you can do on. So thanks for the question. Not sure exactly if that was the answer you were looking for, but yeah, it's interesting too. I see a lot of these traditional artists who are rushing into the NFT space with very little understanding of digital art, which can be fine. But I've seen questions like, how do you make NFTs animate? And it's just, a very core misunderstanding of what's going on there. They just see the dollar signs and they want to get involved. So you're exactly right, Dahmer. It requires a very big following like Beeple. And while I respect Beeple and his hustle, the artwork itself, the imagery is not my cup of tea in particular. So I think his style of art tends to be really popular on Instagram, which tends to get a lot of eyeballs, which makes it much easier to, get the cachet and the viewership that helps you sell NFTs for a lot of money. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is the initial sales of his NFTs that got him all that money were largely coming from a single individual who has an enormous stake in Ether. And so there's a little bit of a hype bubble that was encouraged by people who stand to gain a lot of money from their positions in Ether. So anyways, thanks for the questions. I have a lot of rambling thoughts about NFTs, some good, some bad. But in any case, I hope you found this creative exercise useful. New videos every Tuesday. I enjoy sharing my creative process with all of you. And this is a simple, fun little one, kind of a discrete, singular kind of image without like a whole lot of really detailed scenic elements, but fun nonetheless. If you like my work and you want to keep up with it, the best place is at Instagram. Follow me at DLGNCE. Also on Twitter. The website is diligence.studio. If you want to support the practice and help me keep making episodes and getting involved in our Discord server, please check out the description or the link in the description below. I appreciate a one-time donation, or if you want to subscribe on a monthly basis, that would be excellent as well. Please hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. I appreciate each and every one of you. Until next week, this is Stuart saying thanks so much,